We recap the draft with Colton Pouncy from The Athletic.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's good, everybody? Matt Derry with you on a Thursday edition of Locked On Lions right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today is Thursday, May 1st. Yes, everybody's Justin Timberlake gifts are out and about. It's going to be May. Colton Pouncy with us from The Athletic today as we get his thoughts on what the Lions and Brad Holmes did this past weekend. Locked On Lions today, brought to you by our friends at Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Follow us on all social media platforms. Thanks to our everydayers that are out there. We are getting some SpeakPipe voicemails in to be our call of the day tomorrow. I will wade through some of those. We heard from some of the legends that have hit us up for tomorrow. All right, Colton is with us from The Athletic. You can also listen to the podcast he and Nick Baumgartner do, which I do, called Welcome to Detroit. Colton, great to see you. Where do you want to start, my man?
Yeah, I guess we got to start with the first round, right? I mean, that was kind of a surprise pick to some, but
not to you and Nick. You and Nick, you mentioned Tyreek Williams. Take some credit. Come on now.
Yeah, we were big fans of his game, and we understand we understood at the time it wouldn't be like a sexy pick because he's a run stuffing defensive tackle. But I think the more you dive into what he's all about. He's really quick. I think he said he stumbled in his pro day 40, and I think he said he would have run like a 4.8, 4.9. So if you believe that, he's got some speed there. He's a really smart player, comes with a great football IQ, understanding of the game, watches a lot of film. You see that translate to the field because, the second the ball is snapped, he's almost like reading the quarterback's mind and kind of knows where the ball's going and can shut a block and go make a tackle. So you couple that with, some untapped upside as a pass rusher. I think you're getting, a really good player at a solid base. If his floor is just as a really good run stuffer, I think it's going to be a hit as a pick. But if you add the other stuff on top of that and he reaches that ultimate ceiling, I think you got a Lee McNeal 2.0 on your hands. And that's something Brad kind of mentioned himself.
When the pick went down, and like I said, you and Nick talked about Tyreek on your show leading up to the draft as an option there. When you saw certain players still on the board, as Araku, Green, who we know has slipped all the way to 59 because of concerns off the field, and anybody else that was kind of there, did it stun you, or were you like, yeah, I can see it right away why Brad made that pick?
Yeah, it didn't really stun me. I mean, one thing that we had been talking about for the last few months here is, when you go through the roster, you're looking for not only immediate needs but future needs, and so I was looking at defensive tackle and. You look at that position for this year, they're pretty set. They got Aleem coming back from injury. They got DJ Reader. Levi's back on a 1-year deal. Roy Lopez, you added him. Mekhi Wingo's going to come back from his knee injury. So in a lot of ways, you were set there for 2025. But you look at that position next year, DJ Reader's a free agent. Levi's a free agent. Roy Lopez is a free agent. So you're losing some guys for 2026. And, Brad's going to take the best player available with an idea of the future as well. So that pick made a lot of sense to me. I figured he was the guy that they would like because they love their run stuffing defensive tackles. And if they saw the same pass rush upside that we did, I thought that would make a lot of sense for them.
Do you hear the narrative, and do you agree or disagree with it, that Brad maybe he thinks too much about down the road and that, oh, come on, go for it. And he had even mentioned, I was trying to trade up to get an edge. He brought that up. Is there too much emphasis on wanting to be good for too long and not going for it? Or is it a balance that you think he's mastered?
I think it's a tough balance to master in general. I think he's done a good job kind of towing the line there because, you do want to win now and try to get as many pieces as possible to help your team win as soon as possible, especially if you haven't won a Super Bowl yet, But at the same time, he is trying to keep this open, 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road. It doesn't just stop with this core. I think he's trying to, replenish that talent down the road. So I think this is how you're supposed to do it. If I were building a team, I would do it the same way. Not to say I'm Brad Holmes, but this is kind of ideally how you do it in the modern NFL. He's built a roster that's good enough to win now. And at the same time, I think the roster is so good that you don't have a ton of immediate holes or, there aren't too many rookies that are going to start on a team like this, a championship contender. So if that's the case, why not look for the future? Why not draft a Tyreek Williams that can help you, now and next year and 2 years from now and 3 years from now? Why not draft an Isaac TeSlaa who, if you think can be a really good player down the road, like get him in here now and let him develop behind these guys. So I don't really see a problem with that. I think this is how you're supposed to build a team in the modern NFL. And I think, Brad knows what he's doing.
Certainly the plan, and we're going to get into the edge talk, but certainly the plan is, all right, if Marcus Davenport's healthy, he's out there. And you got a nice rotation of interior bigs, I guess you could say, do a little basketball term. But do you see a scenario where you got Williams on the field with Reeder until McNeal comes back, and maybe Onwuzurike's slide into some, some edge snaps throughout the beginning of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something they did kind of last year when they lost some guys. So I think they like Levi on the edge. They're comfortable moving him out there if they need to. So I think that would make a lot of sense. In the meantime, I'm also not convinced that they're done at that position, just because they've talked all offseason, like, we'd love to get 3 or 4 more edge rushers, or, we'd love to keep adding to that room. And every time we talked to them, they said, we're not done here yet. And if your only addition after that was a 6th-round rookie, I don't know if that really solves that need. So I do feel like they're going to keep their eyes open and keep looking at that position. Obviously, we saw training camp unfold last year. They did not have a wide receiver 3. So what they do, they go out and get Tim Patrick, and he solidifies that role. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see something similar if they're not really comfortable with that room. But it seems like they're comfortable with, a lot of the pieces there. Marcus Davenport, what has he played, like 6 games the last 2 years? I think there's some reason to be concerned for that stuff, like the potential of an injury, especially a guy with that history. But they like his game, and he's kind of represents everything they look for out of like that second edge spot. So if he's able to stay healthy, you got a really good duo. But I think the question is just the depth of that position behind Hutch and Davenport.
Well, you and I are recording on Thursday afternoon. If Cash Doll shows up at the Pistons game tonight with her boyfriend, you better text one of your writing buddies and go, hey, we go over there and ask him if he's coming back. I still think there's a chance that Zarius Smith's agent, obviously right now, is playing the game, but you get closer to August 1, September 1, maybe that number comes down and he comes back. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm keeping an eye on him for sure. And part of me wondered, like, is he one of those vets that, he's getting to that age now in his 30s where he's like, let me just skip the OTAs and, the offseason workouts. I'll show up a little later. Or if he was just looking at depth charts around the league after the draft to say, okay, well, this team, I signed with them, and all of a sudden they draft 1st-round edge to, try to play over me. Like, maybe he was looking at that. Obviously, the Lions didn't go that route. So I think that makes the fit and the return even easier to envision if they can make the financials work. So definitely keeping an eye on him for sure.
Talking to Colton Pouncy from The Athletic, and also the Welcome to Detroit podcast with his partner in crime, Nick Baumgartner. Those guys do a great job at theathletic.com. The Tate Ratliff pick, I know I loved it. I see him stepping in and starting right away. And I know that Mahogany's there, Glasgow's there. Heck, what if Miles Frasier comes in and looks good? But Ratliff, to me, he just fits the bill. He's a really good football player. Did you love that pick? And did you like the move up to get him?
Yeah, I did. And I didn't mind the move up. I know they had to part ways with pick 130 in the 4th, but if you think there's any sense like that a team could go and, snipe you for your guy, I say just go up and get him. I think Brian Hudspeth, their director of college scouting, mentioned a couple weeks ago that like there's really, I want to say he said 55 to 70-ish players that like they think are really good in a given year nowadays with NIL and players going back to school. So if you think that's the case and like one of your guys is available and you're kind of worried that team might come up and snipe you, like go get him. Like I understand that. And Tate Ratliff is a really good player. I think he can start at guard for 10 years. I think he can start at guard this year. He's got this like mean, nasty tenacity to him. Team captain at Georgia, has a tattoo of a lion on his arms, which what we kind of learned during the draft. That was kind of cool. He got that a year ago. Didn't even know where he'd end up a year later. So I love that pick. He was kind of one of the players I was watching when they got to that 2nd round. It's okay, they're going to make a move. They're going to come up and get someone. And it seems like they were looking at some edges in that territory. Nick Scorton was one. I think he went 51st to the Panthers.
Right.
So maybe he was one of the players they were targeting. There's some others that were still available when they went to pick 57, but Brad isn't going to compromise on what he thinks, are the prerequisites for a good football player. If you're not one of those guys that's high on his board, but you play a position that everyone thinks that he needs, he's not going to pick that player. He's going to pick the better one on his board. So Ratliff was a better player over some of those edges, and thought it was a really good fit.
Everybody's talking about the wide receiver pick, obviously in the 3rd round. I want to get Colton's thoughts on that. We'll do that coming up next, right here on a Thursday edition of Locked On Lions. But first, Locked On Lions today brought to you by Gametime. We know it's tonight. We got Pistons. We got Knicks, game 6 at LCA. You want to go to the game. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every basket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. You can be in the arena tonight with our friends at Gametime. Last-minute ticket buying, take the stress out of it with Gametime. They make it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Seriously, the all-in pricing at Gametime is the best, meaning no surprise fees at checkout. The number is there, you know what you're spending, and it's that much easier. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Our man Colton Pouncy with us from The Athletic has covered the Lions for a while now, formerly at Michigan State. Colton, every year that you've been away from Michigan State, every year they get a new athletic director. This is a very, very exciting.
Seems like it. Yeah.
maybe you and I should run that athletic department. My goodness, what a circus. I'm sure you're glad you're kind of away from that beat for right now, right?
Yeah, a little easier on the Lions beat right now.
Oh my goodness. All right, so Isaac TeSlaa, everybody's talking about him because, and I was talking to John McAdoo earlier, and he said, well, they traded they traded 3 third-round picks for him, if you really look at it with the exchange. But what'd you make from going from 102 to 70 for a guy that on many people's boards, even Mel Kiper said, thought it was a reach? I had this receiver ahead of him. What'd you think of the move? And really was the blocking at the Senior Bowl. It seemed like the icing on the cake, huh?
Yeah. Immediate thought was, man, they gave up a lot. So this guy must be good if they're giving up this much for him. And I'd done like a little bit of homework on him. I won't say like, I did a ton, but just looking at him and his story, I think from the outside looking in, it makes sense because he's got the size at 6'3", 6'4". He's got some speed, ran a 4.43 40. His RAS, relative athletic score, was 9.93, I believe. So he's a really good athlete. I think that's where you start, which is funny because, they came down wearing the HWS, height, weight, speed hoodies where they crossed out saying they're all about film evaluation. That was sort of a height, weight, speed pick in some ways, but then you kind of get into more of the backstory where it's like, okay, Brad was at the Senior Bowl and saw this guy blocking DBs and safeties and going to the second level and like being really physical in the run game. And that's where he first caught his eye. And then you see, his strong hands. You can really make contested catches. He didn't have to do it a ton, but in the random spurts that they allowed him to have that opportunity, I thought he came through. Really works well in the back of the end zone on scramble drills, things like that. So really instinctive player, not afraid to stick his nose in things. And when you learn more about his story, growing up, on the West Side and coming from Hudsonville, going to Division II school, working his way up to Power 5, playing the SEC. And then, just being a Lions fan his whole life, showing up to his pro day and his team visit with the Lions.
Yeah.
And wearing a jersey from 8th grade, a Lions jersey. And Brad said he thought that was kind of cheesy until you kind of learn more about the story. And it's like, no, this man grew up a Lions fan, and what better time to wear that? I thought it was really cool. So I think when you see the total picture, it's not just height, weight, speed. It's, intangibles, what makes him tick. That's the stuff that, we don't really get to see until the players are drafted. And then you see that stuff and you're like, okay, that pick makes sense. I will say again, it's a lot to give up. So they have to feel really confident in this guy. And it seems like they are.
How does he fit this year in the offense? And do you see a scenario where they say, all right, we love Khalif Raymond and Dan especially loves him, but we got to get him on the field somehow. Does that mean like a guy like Leaf is the odd man out in some looks, or, how do they make that happen? Because, there's only one football and there's plenty of weapons on this team.
Yeah. That was something Dan mentioned, that they did want to get younger at the receiver position. I think he mentioned that the owners meetings. I followed up with Brad when we talked to him before the draft. And he's like, yeah, we're in alignment on that. Like, we would like to add some young talent to that room. So you get that into TeSlaa. And, obviously I don't think they needed to make that move unless they really felt confident in the player, which they did. So the fact that they went out and got him and traded up for him, I think he's going to play this year. And I think he's going to be the wide receiver 4. You're pretty good with Tim Patrick, Saint, and JMO this year. But I do see him cutting into Khalif's touches offensively a little bit. And, Khalif is sort of like the Saint backup. So if you need like a Tim Patrick backup or just, some more speed in there, because, Tim's more of the possession receiver. So if you want some more speed out there with TeSlaa, you can put him and JMO and Saint on the field at the same time. I think that's pretty dangerous. So I imagine they'll pick and choose their spots for him, but I think he can help. I don't think he's this developmental player that some people thought he was. Like, I think he can come in, at the very least be a blocker in the run game and then maybe stretch the field as a vertical threat.
What else stands out about the last 4 picks? Obviously, we talked a little bit about Miles Frasier. Everybody's talking about Hassan and what he can do in terms of rushing the passer. And then the 2 picks in the 7th round. I know Ahmed is the talk just because of he's an edge, and my gosh, I mean, his personality is through the roof.
Yeah. I thought they did a good job on day 3 as well. Getting Miles Frasier, who's a guy I thought would be gone by the 3rd, maybe 4th round, getting him in the 5th and, trade up for him a little bit. But that was really solid value, I think, because, he sort of reminds me a lot of Christian Mahogany, a guy they got last year. So he's a powerful mauler in every sense of the word. A guy that I think could start, maybe not this year, but next year if you need him to. So I think the idea of getting 3 young guards in here with Mahogany, Frasier, and Ratledge, I think is really intriguing. I don't know what that means for the future of Graham. He's getting up there. So, but beyond this year, having those 3 young guys just duke it out and say, let the best man win. That's where you want to be. I'm sure there are teams across the NFL that are pretty jealous of what the Lions have at that guard position right now. And then, Hassan, man, like we were all out of breath talking to that dude, just watching him on Zoom. We're like, I think I'm ready to run through a wall. That's crazy. And, he has a great story, was born here and then moved to Egypt and lived there. And then I think he didn't start playing football till 2019, became the first, Egyptian born FBS player and now makes his way to the NFL. So, what a story. Seems like a Dan Campbell guy in every sense of the word, very intense, sort of a go-getter, try-hard type, but getting him in the 6th round, if he's ready this year and just say, hey man, 3rd down, we know they're going to pass it. Let's get you out in the field and see what you can do. I think that can make some sense for him this year. We'll see what his long-term value is. He's a 6th round pick after all, but I like the idea of getting him in there. And then the 2 Georgia players that they ended with and Jan Jackson, Dominic Levitt. Jackson was a team captain, walk-on at Georgia, which, you don't see very often, guys that walk on Georgia and make their way into starting territory by the end of their tenure there. I think he spent 6 years there. So he was there for a long time and, earned the trust of that coaching staff out there. So I think that speaks to how he is and how he's wired. So as a depth piece, I think that makes sense. And then Dominic Levitt, former Mizzou guy. So it kind of hurt to see him transfer to Georgia when he did a couple years ago, but trying to make a name for himself over there. 4.4 speed guy. So he can really move and stretch the field. So I'm curious to see if he has a chance. Obviously you drafted him, you have to think he's pretty solid, but that receiver room is going to be pretty stacked. So curious to see how he performs in training camp. But at the very least, I think he can help them on special teams, maybe stick around the practice squad and give him a chance to keep developing a young receiver behind the scenes.
Do you see safety 3 as a competition right now between Jackson and Lauren Strickland?
Yeah, I do. That's when you lose a guy like Iffy, it's always tough and you're trying to scramble. I mean, so much of our attention has been on the edge position, but when I was doing a depth chart, I was looking at the safety spot. I'm like, they could probably use another body there. So I think that'll probably be a competition. We'll see who else they add. I do think that position is probably easier to take care of if, Kirby or Branch gets hurt. They're always good safeties you can find off someone's practice squad or a veteran that's sitting out, I feel like. So, but for now, in terms of what we're going into with training camp, I think those guys will probably be battling out for that spot.
Colton Pouncy with us. All right. So the GM, Brad Holmes, went on the radio the other day, got a little snippy about I don't understand why people keep talking about the edge thing. What's Brad's play here, do you think? And what is he snippy, or is this just, hey, I went up to try to get somebody and you guys don't know? Like, how do you kind of view his mindset on that position?
Yeah. There's some stuff that he obviously can't say. And sure. I'm sure that's frustrating when you want to say it. I will say one thing that seems like we have a good grasp on, my colleague at The Athletic, Mike Silver, was embedded with the Jaguars, and, James Gladstone, their new GM, comes from that Rams tree. So Brad knows him pretty well. And Mike was just with the front office for their first draft, which I thought was pretty cool. Had some really good inside access. So when that TeSlaa trade goes down, there's a piece in the story where Silver kind of writes that Gladstone thinks that the Lions want to come up for Ashton Gillott, the Louisville edge rusher, who's sitting there at around pick number 60, sticking out like a sore thumb. I kind of heard that the Lions, liked him and liked his game. So I was looking at him when things were kind of unfolding there. Turns out in Jacksonville, that's who they thought the Lions wanted to come up for. And he ends up going, I think, 63rd or something like that to the Chiefs. So that, if you believe that story and kind of what they're saying over there, that's one scenario where Brad was trying to come up for an edge rusher, didn't work out. But another play that he really liked, Isaac TeSlaa, was still sitting there, was still down to do the same move, the same trade. And you go up and get I would say, the last few elite players in your bucket in terms of this draft class. So you make a move and get a guy like that. So yeah, there are things in situations like that we don't really know unless it comes to light later on, where Brad's working the phones. I think he said, I made 30 calls and only 2 of them got accepted on day 2. So I'm sure there's some frustration on his end. And the other thing I would say is, I think, during the season, Brad saw a lot of the, we need an elite pass rusher. We need to get a Myles Garrett, a Max Crosby type. And I never thought that was realistic. Anyone paying attention probably agreed, because they can't pay everyone here. So I almost think the conversation has changed from there. And it's now we're just asking for a Zarius Smith type. We don't need a star pass rusher, but I feel like Brad is almost still stuck in that previous conversation. So that's where I would say the disconnect is.
Yeah, just want to get a good one, and doesn't have to be. We know it can't be an elite one. That's for sure. All right, want to get into some NFC North stuff with Colton, which we will do that coming up right here on Locked On Lions. And as I told you earlier, Locked On Lions brought to you by our friends at Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles such as EA Sports College Football 25, Call of Duty, all easily. You stream them just like you do your favorite TV shows. What if you could jump into your favorite Xbox titles without needing your console in every room? That's an issue. It's solved when you have the Fire TV Stick 4K. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On, and you get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. It's available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube on 3rd Gen. Colton Pouncy with us from The Athletic and the Welcome to Detroit podcast. What about the division, Colton? Interesting stuff with LaFleur and Ben Johnson. I mean, that's becoming kind of a cute rivalry. They're going back and forth. I love where the Lions are right now because they can stay out of that, let those two duke it out. But how do you view that and everything else going on in the division?
Yeah, I did see. Was that a recent interview that LaFleur did talking about Ben Johnson? He was asked about Ben Johnson.
The draft.
Yep. I don't really know him. Which when you hear that, I assumed when Ben made those comments that they at least crossed paths at some point, or were
at the owners meeting, something.
Yeah, something like that. But it seems like they really don't know each other. So maybe that was just Ben trying to get some goodwill in Chicago. But the Lions are very happy to stay out of that. I'm sure that's kind of how they roll. So yeah, let the other two teams kind of duke it out there.
How do you view, I saw the phone call that the Bears obviously published, the phone call that when Ben was on the phone with Colston Loveland, and it was a little cheesy. Ben seems to I'm not saying his personality has changed from Detroit to Chicago, but he's kind of doing a Dan Campbell impersonation at times, isn't he?
I haven't paid much attention, but I believe it. I mean, the thing with Ben is that he was such the mad scientist type here. He just preferred to stay behind the scenes. Not to say he has a bad personality or anything like that. I just don't think he, likes the attention, the cameras and stuff. But obviously you want the challenge of, being at the highest level, which is being a head coach in the NFL. So with that comes the cameras and the attention, the media appearances and things like that. So maybe he's just learning how to deal with all that. And if it comes off a little authentic, maybe his crutch is Dan Campbell when he's been around. So it would make sense if that's what he's doing. But, I think in due time we'll kind of find his own voice and figure out how to do this thing.
Bears draft. I mean, obviously 2 high-end weapons for Caleb. They're trying to get Nick Chubb now, kind of in a fight, sounds like, with the Browns to get Chubb. Where does that put them? If let's say they get Chubb and they've added, Luther Burton and Loveland. I mean, how do you view the Bears right now?
Yeah, I'm kind of in, wait and see mode with them because obviously last year they made some moves and everyone crowned them offseason champions and then didn't really go anywhere.
They're offseason champs every year, Cole.
Every year it seems. And as someone from Chicago and all my Bears fan friends are telling me the same thing, we're going to win the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah.
I'm in wait and see mode with that team. So yeah, I mean, I like what they've done. Obviously getting a head coach like Ben Johnson, offensive mind like him to pair with your young quarterback makes a lot of sense. What they did in the draft, I think Colson Loveland can have a Sam Laporta type impact early on in Chicago. Again, I'm a Mizzou guy, so Luther Burden, I'm partial to him. I thought he was a first-round talent that you get in the second round, so should come and step in right away and kind of make some plays for them. Really good with the ball in his hands after the catch. So I like what they did in the draft, but again, I like what they did on the offensive line this offseason. So it's just like seeing it together on the field, and when the pads are on and the whistles are blowing, like that's what I'm waiting to see. And until then, like I would still put them maybe fourth in the division.
Minnesota and Green Bay, anything stand out from the draft that you liked that they did or maybe didn't like?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't think the Packers needed to go with Matthew Golden. That felt like sort of a luxury pick to me. I thought they had some needs elsewhere.
I thought they were playing the crowd.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like to me.
Get the speed guy. That's really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Minnesota, they addressed the offensive line with Donovan Jackson, who I thought was a good player. Very versatile. He made the switch to, I believe, left tackle for Ohio State's championship run, and they don't win that championship without him. So really good player. They didn't have a ton of picks, so that kind of hurt their draft overall. But, what they did in the offseason, adding to their defensive line and interior, adding to their offensive line with some of those moves, I think it makes sense. So it's all about JD over there, though. So if he's ready to go and he looks the part, then they'll be pretty set up.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you think he is? Are you ready to say? I mean, they're not going to win 14 games again.
Yeah.
Their road schedule is just as rough as the Lions, but how ready do you think he's going to be?
I'm a big JJ believer. I was even last year when he was coming out of the draft. A lot of people are like, "Oh, he didn't throw a ton of passes." I'm like, "Yeah, but you see what he can do when he does have the opportunity to throw." And I just think he's a great kid, wired the right way. I think his teammates are going to love him. So I even saw him, talking to local media out there a couple of days ago, and he's got like this infectious smile and this kind of it factor, and who knows how that translates, especially coming off like a knee injury. But man, I'm rooting for him. I'll say that. I don't know how it'll be, but Kevin O'Connell's gotten the most out of some lesser quarterbacks than him, so I feel pretty good with having a coach like that teaching him.
Yeah, no question. And all three teams in the division went out and did something that the Lions have been doing, and that is adding to the offensive line. So they're kind of on that blueprint. Colton, great to see you. Thanks for doing this today, my man.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Colton Pouncy with us from The Athletic on a Thursday. Locked On Lions, back again tomorrow.